How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Perfect Reload, here for another episode of Full Motion Sickness, where we take a look at the wide, wonderful, and let's be honest, weird world of FMV games. My name is Steve, and I'm not going to lie to you, this is my second time having to do this video. So the first time, which would have been great to upload, but there were some issues with putting it into Premiere, it would have been my first time reaction because I had never seen these games before. We are doing Dragon's Lair and Dragon's Lair 2 Time Warp today. So I'm not going to lie to you and say that I've never seen them before. I did watch them it has been a few days since I filmed it. So I have seen them, but some of the particulars obviously aren't going to stick in my mind after only seeing them once. But they are just absolutely fantastic, hand-drawn, animated FMV games. They're not what you think of when you think of FMV games, especially the kind of stuff that we cover here on the show, which is, typically with real actors. This is all animated. This is done by Don Bluth. Don Bluth was a pretty big animator at Disney, worked on a lot of stuff, and that style translated really well to this game. Oddly enough, you wouldn't think that it would, but these were definitely different than your typical run-of-the-mill 90s FMV games, because FMV games in the 90s kind of became synonymous with either point-and-click adventure games or first-person shooter games, light gun games that you would see in the arcade. And this is neither one of those. This is essentially just one long quick time event. But yeah, let's not waste any more time. Let's dive right in to Dragon's Lair. All right. So yeah, you can see the date on this. This is 1983. Dragon's Lair, it came out on multiple systems, but it originally was an arcade game. And, I wasn't alive in 1983, but I can only imagine how much this stood out against everything else that was in the arcade in 1983. Because if you remember right, 1983 is around the time of the crash. It's not that long after it, right? The Atari VCS, the Atari 2600, 5200, 7800, oversaturated. We're a few years before the NES coming to America. A lot of arcades were still running their Pong games, Missile Command, Asteroids, all that kind of stuff. And so to see something like this, especially with this beautiful hand-drawn animation, I can only imagine how much it stood out. And the game has gotten, re-releases on multiple systems. I believe the most recent platform it was put out on was the PlayStation 3. It's gotten compilations and things like that. They kind of redid it a couple of times with fixing, I guess, the look of the game. I don't like the way that they drew the newer characters. It looked just kind of like modern animation. It loses a lot of the charm that something like this had. But I mean, just to see the level of detail that this has for being, a video game. This wasn't, a feature-length film or anything like that. And you'll see the reason why I'm doing both games. And you can tell by the runtime of this video, they weren't super long by any stretch. And we are seeing, perfect playthroughs here. These aren't, we would typically have. These games were actually pretty brutal. I've played the arcade version of this once. I've never played Dragon's Lair 2, and I confirmed that when I watched this the first time. I'd never seen anything from Dragon's Lair 2 before. I remember from my childhood playing the NES version, which was a super difficult, side-scrolling platformer, very, very different than this. And that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And I just, at the time, I didn't understand why it was so different. And obviously, there's, technical limitations. Could you imagine this being on a Nintendo? Like this being put into a Nintendo cartridge? It would have, melted the entire system. But I would say, if you want to experience Dragon's Lair, you play this version of the game, not the NES version. But I really like this style of animation. I don't watch a lot of animation in general. I'm not an anime fan. I'm not a fan of a lot of the like Rick and Morty and Adventure Time and all that stuff that's kind of come along over the years. It just never really clicked with me. I watched The Simpsons growing up. I still enjoy The Simpsons to this day. I would say probably the most recent animated stuff I've enjoyed was like the early Adult Swim stuff, Aqua Teen, all that. But when I look back at my childhood, we had a lot of the like original Disney movies on VHS in the house. You know, a lot of like the compilations, like the Mickey compilations from like the 40s and 50s and 60s, stuff like Fantasia, all that kind of stuff. And that I think I kind of grew in a real appreciation for that style. And, you know, into my childhood as like Pixar became a thing, I really like the look of a lot of the early Pixar stuff, which is funny because early 3D video games I can't stand to look at, and you would think that early 3D animation would be difficult for me as well, but I don't know, it was just so well done. You know, the technology was obviously there for filmmaking a little bit more than video games at the time, as video games have to be, you know, interactive, as well as, you know, films getting a much larger budget than games were at the time. But I mean, you see like these glowing effects, the green and yellow here, the like pseudo transparency stuff that you see throughout this, like it's just so amazing to look at. And I think the thing with Dragon's Lair 1 and Dragon's Lair 2, which we'll get into in a little bit, is this is like really breathtaking stuff, especially for the time, for what Don Bluth was able to do and cram into an arcade cabinet. Dragon's Lair 2, I mean, we'll talk about it when we get there, but my God, they up the level so much. It's like a wild amount of detail that they cram into it. And it's just something to really kind of sit back and appreciate. And I think it kind of puts it into perspective with, I mean, when was you know, this was 1983, and then we didn't see a game that really looked like this until, what, Cuphead? And that was probably a little bit, that was less than 10 years ago at this point, I believe. And Cuphead was obviously a tribute to a lot of kind of like the, probably I would say more like the Warner Brothers style of animation, you know, a little bit more of the Looney Tunes style of stuff, and obviously way more interactive than this. But I think it shows that there is a market for games that would look like this. But I think it also shows, with the fact that there's been so few that have done it, the level of skill it would take to do it is probably very preventative for seeing more games that look like this. But all of this stuff, I mean, this is insane to look at. Like, it's so fluid, it's so smooth, it looks fantastic. I mean, just really ahead of its time. And it's kind of, you know, it's interesting to see how this is really kind of the original FMV game to an extent. There were some other stuff along the way in the 80s. But it's interesting to see that, you know, we started off with this, and then less than a decade later, you know, we're just all in on, let's not have it be animated. Let's not have it look like a video game at all, because video game art style, of course, is much more similar to an animated art style than it would be using real actors. And you saw digitized actors become a thing with Pit Fighter, and then obviously made incredibly popular by Mortal Kombat and all the clones and ripoffs of Mortal Kombat that came along the way. But that was, you know, that was kind of like a 50-50 blend, right? Like it was a mix of the real actors and these fantastical backgrounds that were drawn and animated. So it's tough to see that thread line in a way. You don't really see the natural progression of, let's start it off with this kind of very Disney style animation, this bubbling effect and all this. This is, to me, this scene here is one of the most impressive in the entire game, with just the level of detail of the volcanic, you know, textures on the ground, and like the stuff bubbling up and all that, like the lava is just, it's just truly incredible. But to get back to my point, it's tough to see that through line of going from this to using real actors. It basically just kind of seems like we just abandoned, let's not have these things look anything like video games. I think that was the marketing behind them, was we want to make these feel like games. And that's how a lot of those games even got made, was they were pitched to money people, whatever publisher wanted to put them out, whatever film company kind of wanted to pony up the cash as, oh, no, these are more like a movie. They're more mature. They're more sophisticated than a regular video game. And that's really kind of what that whole pull was. And I think that is part of the reason why I'm drawn to FMV stuff so much, is that kind of like element of these guys were kind of scamming the video game industry, and in a way they were kind of scamming the consumer base, because so many of those games were brutally short. They played terribly. The acting, as you've seen if you've watched other episodes of the show, was laughable at best at times. Some games did have good performances. You know, there were some FMV games that attracted some very large Hollywood talent. Christopher Walken's appeared in FMV games. The guy that played Lorelai's boyfriend for a little bit on the Gilmore Girls, actually in that same game with Christopher Walken. It's called Ripper. And you know, you kind of saw this element of let's see if we can kind of put one over on these people, because I think there was an aspect of, well, we can't make it in Hollywood because we're not talented enough to make it in the world of traditional filmmaking. I bet you we can pull one over on these video game people and get some of these games made. And that's really kind of what it feels like. Princess Daphne's dress here, I always thought was super impressive. The transparent layer of her fabric, especially going against the texture of the ball that she's kind of encompassed in, as well as her hair, and then getting the glitter on top of it, is just really, really cool to look at. Like, they did such an amazing job. Also, seeing this in an arcade in 1983, the way she's dressed, I'm sure probably, I imagine this was part of the attract screen on that cabinet to get people to put quarters in. Because it's like, man, you certainly don't see stuff like that. I mentioned this in the first attempt of doing the video. Leave a comment below. Is this whole section here, is this a tribute to The Hobbit? I'm not a Lord of the Rings or a Hobbit fan, but I do know that there's like a dragon obsessed with money in there. So is this dragon with the gold coins, is this whole thing like Don Bluth's, you know, attempt at paying homage to The Hobbit? Leave a comment if I'm right or wrong on that one, so I'd like to know. But Dirk the Daring has slayed the dragon. He has the key. Now he can unlock Maid Marian's chastity belt. And our hero saves the day. And that was Dragon's Lair 1. And we'll be back in just a moment with Dragon's Lair 2. All right, and now we are going to take a look at the follow-up, which came several years later. This is 7 years after the first game, and you will see what they were able to do in that length of time. I think the quality of animation ultimately is a little bit better in this game. This is Dragon's Lair 2 Time Warp. Now, aside from seeing this the first time I tried to film this game, I had never seen this before. I knew it existed, but I had never played it. I had never seen images of it or anything like that. Definitely not any footage. I thought maybe I had, and then when I had done this, I was like, oh no, I've definitely never seen this before. But I came away pretty impressed from this. But let's dive in 3, 2, 1.
Kidnapped. My definitely kidnapped again.
Obviously the big difference is voice acting. You know, we had the narration at the beginning of the previous game, but this is fully voice acted throughout. And if you're curious how the game was played, there was directional buttons. I'm not sure what the cabinet for this looked like, but when the yellow glow pops off, that's when you needed to interact with the correct movement. I've never seen what this cabinet looked like. This did get, as well as the first game, it did get multiple home releases as well. And I assume they just adapted it for a controller-based input. But like seeing him like slide into the money and the coins and all this, like they had that at the end of the last game. I also really enjoyed this Scottish snake. It's like an evil Nardwar snake.
Hurry, we'll get her back. Defeat the foul wizard. My brother in black.
He's got his little satellite dish, time travel device. I love the sword. It's kind of like the gear shift / steering wheel. Oh, she's got that rolling pin.
So here, brother. You'll
Look how he just hurls that sword and it lands perfectly in the stone.
junk. Boil in the
Gotta go after those pterodactyls.
Jerk will be helpless.
Just casually stab it right in the mouth. Once again, that transparency on Princess Daphne's outfit, unbelievable.
Go get her.
We talked about in the first game, it looked like, you know, there could be like a sort of a tribute to the Hobbit at the end there. This kind of strikes me as a tribute to the Wizard of Oz. You know, these are kind of stand-ins for the flying monkeys.
My hero.
Man, Dirk is he's just messing everything up. Well, I guess that's not lava. He just dove in perfectly fine.
Farewell, you fool.
Yeah, these water effects are just unbelievable. I mean, my God. As someone who has no artistic skill whatsoever, I find people that can draw, like, that's a skill that I will never have, and I am very envious of it. It is incredible. Yeah, and then we go into this like prolonged, full-on Alice in Wonderland sequence with like all the actual characters. I was kind of surprised to see that. I'm a huge Alice in Wonderland fan. I think it's one of the most like trippy stories ever. The animated version of it, you know, like super psychedelic. I've never seen that. It was Tim Burton did that live action one some years ago. I had probably over a decade ago at this point. I've never seen that. Their version of the Cheshire Cat is like definitely not like as menacing, but I do like the look of it. They're trying to go off with his head. But I don't want to put words in Don Bluth's mouth or anything like that. I don't know the man, and I don't know the background of the people that animated this stuff, but this always kind of struck me. This style of animation, not just this game, but this style has always struck me as being fueled by just a lot of LSD. You know, just you go on a long, strange trip and you come back and it's like, let's just draw a bunch of babies. Let's just draw a bunch of naked babies flying around, and a medieval man with a sword, and there's time travel, and then this lady who's half naked, and this is an arcade game for children. Now we are in the Bible portion of our program. You know, when I was going to Catholic school as a kid, if they had just shown me this and said, yo, this is the Bible, I probably would have been more inclined to read the Bible.
Apple.
Mine.
She wants his apple. Oh, eat the core and all. Oh dear. Yeah, this is definitely biblically accurate, but I remember this pretty much being what happens in the Bible. This is the plot for what the hell is the Mel Gibson Jesus movie? Passion of the Christ? This is just the plot for that, right? Jesus flies around on a magical time traveling satellite that looks like a microscope, and then he hangs out with Beethoven. You know, the whole thing is with Beethoven is Beethoven was deaf. He wasn't blind. He'd be freaking the fuck out if he saw this stuff going on.
Dirk the daring, stay put, don't jump. Never fear a creative gust. Wind that's born of
He's getting plates shoved up his butt. Cat's trying to eat him. Now we're in the Wonka Vader portion of this. Like, this is like so far further over the top than the first game, you know, like maybe a little Rock Me Amadeus reference there at the end, get a little funky Beethoven, space flute. You were my favorite, space flute. A lot of evil cats. I wonder if Don Bluth was a dog person. This is just a deleted scene from the movie Ray. Just telling Jamie Foxx, yeah, we're just gonna send you through a vortex while you play your piano. It's fine. Nope, and we're all done. Now it's time to go to Egypt. I must save Inox on the moon. Must find Brendan Fraser. Kill him. Welcome to the Scorpion King. I don't like spiders. I don't want those. I don't want a gang of gigantic spiders coming after me. No, thank you. As someone who sleeps with earplugs in so the bugs won't lay eggs in my brain, I don't like this portion of the game. I'm onto them. I know how it works. That's such a cool visual, like emptying the sarcophagus and it just starts like melting everything below it and just like bubbling liquid crawling out. Oh, Franken Mummy's here. I love your cereal. Oh, he's in half. A lot of giant bats. Her outfit has changed. It's because it's not her! Ha ha ha! Big smooch, an evil smooch. Get back to the magic microscope. We gotta go, Dirk. Put it into sword gear. Oh, of course it's a wedding. It's always an evil wedding. Uh-oh. And now we're full on to the Little Mermaid. Just Melissa McCarthy on a coke-fueled rampage. If you were able to get through this game with 1 quarter, you obviously had to make some type of deal with the devil at the crossroads. Bye, Ursula. The structural foundation of all these places that they're hanging out in is just really poor. Somebody called Frank Lloyd Wright and get him on the case. Yes, always a good idea to kiss a sleeping woman. Let's take our sweet ass time waking up. Dirk's over here fighting off all this stuff with the perfectly wrong music for the tone that's going on. They're pumped. And once again, he saves the day, but no! It's still crumbling apart. Get on the microscope, Daphne!
Dirk, my hero.
And their 3 million kids are here. And once again, Dirk the Daring saves the day. And that, my friends, is Dragon's Lair 2 Time Warp. And congratulations, we are all a winner. So yeah, I love those. I thought they were absolutely fantastic. You know, if you spend any time with these games, especially in the arcade, let me know what you thought of them at the time, because they were just a little bit before my time. I didn't play the arcade version of Dragon's Lair 1 until I was an adult. But yeah, let me know. And that's going to do it for me. Now, of course, we'll be back again with another episode of Full Motion Sickness. We'll see you then.